right, next I'll provide an update from the committees and work groups. This year, we did a little bit different. As we normally do, we did member reports, so thank you to everyone who submitted those, but we also asked the committee and work group leads to provide updates as well, and so we'll be going over those today. So we do have standing committees. We have our XCOM chaired by Elizabeth, and I serve as vice chair with Mason as the coordinator. And our standing committees there on the left. Is that the left up there? Yeah. No, on the right. Our coastal committee, Christiani chairs with Glenn Dolphin as a liaison. So if the chairperson of the committee is not a member of XCOM, there is a connection. And so Glenn serves that purpose. Education and Outreach Committee, Allison Zach from Nebraska. Presumably she will now become that liaison position as well, as she's just been recently elected to the XCOM. Our annual meeting, recently chaired by Tom Wolf, now Tammy Davis, and Mason Parker will be serving as that liaison. Our membership committee, as we just heard from, John Wolschlager, and our Watercraft Inspection Decontamination Committee, Robert Walters from Colorado, with Elizabeth serving as the liaison. We'll hear from Robert in the next session. And then we have our working groups, our Building Consensus with Joanne Grady, our Environmental DNA, Adam Sepulveda, who we heard from yesterday, and our Fire Committee, Beth Baer. So we'll be, unfortunately, needing a new person to chair that, it sounds like. In case some of you haven't heard, Beth is moving on. Talk to her about that later, but it's a promotion, so that's good. Our lab committee, Yael Pesmenek, and Seaplane committee by Elizabeth Brown. So we talked about some of these already, and we'll be hearing from the rest of them today as we through this presentation and others moving forward. So first we'll go over the Coastal Committee, and as I mentioned to Chris already, I'll mention it to the rest of the chairs now as I go through these. If there's, I'll give you an opportunity to add or clarify or elaborate on if there's something, a point you want to make sure is clarified or if I missed something. But Christiani from California State Lands Commission chairs the Coastal Committee. In 2019, some accomplishments, completed the best practice guidance document for marine biofouling and management for recreational boats. They want to develop similar best practices, or continuing to develop similar best practices for both mobile marine infrastructure with that Chris alluded to yesterday and commercial fishing vessels. This will provide some guidance to permitting and leasing agencies, and then coordinate among the Pacific states to develop consistent responses from EPA and Coast Guard regarding VITA, as we heard about a few times already. And in 2020, essentially maintaining those efforts and continuing the good work the Coastal Committee does. And so, Chris, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add. With the Education Outreach Committee 2019, just a few weeks ago, a webinar highlighting all the different outreach efforts from Invasive Species Action Network, Play Clean Go, Habitatitude, and Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers. Recommendations for additions to the website and monitoring and outreach efforts for the panel. Evaluated criteria for Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers website, drafted a QZAP status report on the outreach section, and then language for QZAP in 2.0. And priorities for the coming year, taking an inventory of what outreach campaigns WRP states are using, and how to strategize, get the consistent campaign messaging out to the states, and provide a platform for WID station information to access to the public. Nate, and I think kind of alluded to some of this a little bit yesterday, incorporating that social science aspect to it as well, how we can impact behavior change. Allison, anything you'd like to add? Good. And the WID, Decon Think Tank, as we like to refer to it as, chaired by Robert Walters. In 2019, a lot of great stuff happened, developing specifications for on-demand water heater system, water heater-based decontamination systems. We've got, I guess, 2 of those in place now, one in Colorado, one in Tahoe. Not sure if anybody else has been able to do that yet, but it's proving to be really the right direction for us to head. Developed decontamination protocols. The Volvo, that's part of the boating industry engagement. They have quick connects that are on almost, I think, every single one of their outdrives since 2017, if that's right. And so developing protocols for communication on that. Gate fill ballast systems being reviewed by Centurion and Yamaha. ballast boats as well. And there's also, I think, a ballast tank committee. So provide recommendations for the Bureau of Reclamation on Ziegler-Quagga mussel research priorities, and then inform sharing and relationship building between decontamination professionals and upcoming priorities. Provide the recommendations for changes to the upcoming Western Regional Wood Training Curriculum. We talked about this a little bit yesterday at our meeting, or I guess on Tuesday. Provide recommendations for changes and updates to the Tahoe Boat Book. This is something my program helped develop. And then information sharing and relationship building between decontamination professionals. Anything else? All right, well, I guess I'm doing okay. Fire protocol work group, as I mentioned, Beth Baer is chairing that currently, but we will be needing a new chair, so please, if you're interested, think about it. Some accomplishments from 2019, they continue to work on producing standard fire equipment inspection and decontamination protocols for Western states and agencies. Some really great work happening there. It's really important, especially here in the West. Standards will be based on National Wildfire Coordinating Group guidelines with the goal of producing a training manual that WRP states could voluntarily adapt. And the group has revised previous protocol documents developed by Forest Service, Wyoming Game and Fish, and Northern Rockies Wildfire Management Team, and is currently collating revisions into a procedures manual. And the priorities for 2020 is to complete that manual and develop some online training. The seaplane inspection and decontamination is chaired by Elizabeth. This continues to be some interesting discussions happening here, and we have a representative from the Seaplane Pilot Association, I believe. Locally in Tahoe, we have a pretty active group that provides some good training for their members as well. So a webinar on seaplane anatomy and risk areas for AIS happened in 2019, and development of amphibious aircraft inspection protocol. So in 2020, we'll continue to contribute as needed to the Fish and Wildlife Service for a national vector risk assessment on those seaplanes. The lab procedures, chaired by Yale Pasmenik. I think it was on hold maybe due to government shutdown, potentially. And then testing of buffer agents for Bureau of Reclamation, and moving forward in 2020 to regroup and discuss some of those protocols. So needs of the committees. Oh, I'm sorry, I kind of skipped over some of those. Anything I missed on some of those committees at all?
I just have one thing.
Is your mic?
Sorry. There you go. In addition to needing, we just need a few other people on the fire committee, because Cynthia Tate was also on that at the Forest Service, and she's retired. So right now I think it's Nate, Nick, and Kate. So if you're interested and have any experience in that, it would be great to have a few more people on that. Great. To get it done.
Thank you, Beth. Needs of the committees and work groups. Oh, I'm sorry, was there anybody else that wanted to add anything to their work groups or committees?
Dennis? It's Leah. Could I,
Who?
I just
Who's Leah?
You're sort of looking around. I just wanted to maybe add on what Beth said, that you don't have to be a voting member of the WRP to serve on a committee. So if there are people in this room that feel like they can contribute, and specifically to the fire-related one, I'm sure the committee would love to have you.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, so please, if you're interested, participate. So needs of the committees and work groups for coastal. Primary challenge is, as it's been stated several times, convincing EPA to engage in meaningful consultation with the states while drafting regulations to implement the Vessel Incidental Discharge Act. Consultation efforts thus far have been insufficient. I think we would all agree with that. And I believe this will probably be forming into a recommendation to the task force as well. For education, lack of evolution of outreach campaigns. This is kind of tracking how successful these things are. Are we affecting behavior change? What kind of tools can we use to evaluate all that? And for the think tank, provide recommendations for communication and collaboration between the boat industry and all those various groups that participate in that, the American Boat and Yacht Council, National Marine Manufacturers Association, and a subset, which is the Water Sport Industry Association, which is basically towables, ballast boats and jet skis and things like that. Any questions, or if I missed anything? Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, I'm wondering if, oh geez, sorry. I don't know what the process is to propose or talk about getting a new committee. I mean, it was pretty apparent through the WID think tank and whiskey and a few conversations that I've been having, the training protocol thing, I think could warrant having a committee just to kind of formalize it some.
Okay.
So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have a formalized process, but I think what would make sense is if the chair of those committees or work groups are not part of the XCOM, they have a liaison, and so making that recommendation to the chair or the liaison to bring it forth towards XCOM for discussion and potentially development of a new committee. That's a good question. It sounds like you are, though. And I'm his boss, so. Nate.
Yeah, just in response to that, we do, so as Dennis mentioned, you have to find an XCOM liaison, but there's also a template that you need to fill out to propose a new committee. The XCOM can provide you with that, but it's essentially what the goal of that committee would be, so we clearly define what that committee is looking at, so we don't end up with multiple committees looking at the same thing, or I guess not coordinating efforts. So there is a form, we can provide you with that, and that goes for anyone that may have any interest in tackling any of these issues that these committees are not currently looking at.
Okay, great, thank you for that. Anybody else? Okay. We'll just kind of continue on with recommendations to the task force. A lot of this leads into that. Some fall recommendations: continue to provide funding and consider increasing funding for the regional panels, QZAP and state plans. This is pretty consistent with our past recommendations. Funding is a pretty critical need for coordination. I think the panels at one point had received $100,000 a piece in the past. That got dropped down to 40. But through a lot of our begging and pleading, that is actually increased, I think, as Mason alluded to earlier today, actually increased to 46,000. Is that correct, Susan? Yeah. So we won $6,000. So, but no, it's important to kind of keep that message that coordination and all the good things we do here, QZAP is a building consensus, all those major components that Aaron referred to. We're doing a lot of good stuff with a little bit of money, so that just shows the investment is very worthwhile and valuable. And so the first two recommendations there, the two smaller bullets, are from the Coastal Committee, that the US EPA take all available data information into account to determine the best available technologies and management practices when adopting vessel incidental discharge regulations, and does not default to existing standards simply because they are more expedient to implement. Does that capture? I think it's pretty much right from your report. So is there any questions on that or discussions, or everybody agrees with that recommendation? I don't think we need to take an official vote, do we, Leah? Oh, okay. Cool. And then kind of tailing off of that, the US EPA and Coast Guard engage in meaningful and substantive consultation with the states that provides an opportunity for governors to be directly involved in the crafting and implementation of vessel discharge standards. We've heard this multiple times. It's extremely important to have that engagement and meaningful consultation, as we've heard from Chris and Alan, who's been great champions on that effort. The third bullet there is from the WID think tank. Decon think tank, provide recommendations for communication and collaboration between those boat industry represented or groups that I mentioned previously with the think tank in regards to ongoing work related to watercraft inspection and decontamination. Is there anything you want to add to that, Robert? Okay. Again, all agree that this is a meaningful recommendation to the task force. It's great work that we're accomplishing with the industry. It's super important. We kind of share the same customers, and they've been a great participant at the table, so we want to continue that engagement. And so looking for some input at the federal leadership levels to keep that momentum going, essentially. Is there anything else that somebody would like to offer up as a recommendation for the task force? You have some time, so if there's something that you think about, please email me, and we'll have those discussions at the XCOM level. If there's anything else you want to see included as a recommendation, we'll be going back to the task force in about a month. Okay. Any questions or further discussion? All right, well, thanks everybody, appreciate it.